Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Say Again with me, Amrita Tripathi. I'm in conversation today with Chef Manu Chandra, who's in Bengaluru. He is someone that I've known for probably, well, I'm not going to date us, but it's been more than 20 years. And Manu, it's a delight and privilege to have you on Say Again. You're someone who's been called a legendary chef on the MasterChef program. You featured on Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40 some years ago. You've won so many awards and accolades. Most recently, I think, with Lupa, the restaurant you're at, of which we'll talk about more soon. But first things first, I want to ask you a little bit about your own journey. And if we had to ask you what the most impactful thing or most meaningful thing you think you've done in your life is, what would that be?
The most meaningful thing I've done in my life will probably be uh, what I think is a vestige of creating a bit of a legacy, and I think legacy in my business does not necessarily come from just creating brick and mortar experiences. It comes from being able to create a set of people who can go and do amazing work further on, and I think with time and with experience and of course having opened so many restaurants over the years, done all kinds of stuff in food, that to me now counts as a lot more impactful and a lot more meaningful than anything else really. Um, and I don't like calling them proteges or anything because I think each one goes ahead after a certain amount of learning and then just excels themselves based on their experiences, their exposures, uh, their trials and tribulations. But you know, invariably ends up doing remarkable work in the space, which I think is is what I I I dabble in now. That's my high, that's my excitement to watch people who worked with me in the past go ahead and do amazing work on their own.
Well, it's pretty incredible. Let me rewind then a little bit because, of course, before Manu Chandra Ventures, something you set up a few years ago, um, everyone knew you, for Olive, Fatty Bao, Monkey Bar, Toast and
Yeah,
Tonic. There was a very long stint with another group where, of course, you were, I think you made your name in many ways. But
yeah.
if we rewind even before that, so we would have first crossed paths when you were majoring in history. And I don't think being a chef was necessarily on the horizon, but I could be wrong. It was a bit of a leap. I think back when we were all, younger, it's not the most conventional career. So take me through a little bit about how you decided to go to the Culinary Institute. When did you decide you're going to move from, let's say, a more tried and tested path to what's become an incredible career?
Actually, it was reverse. I think the reason I took the more tried and tested path, quote unquote, is because I was, well, brainwashed would be a very harsh term. I think I was essentially gently coaxed into, uh, by my parents, by the extended family, and saying, "Sure, you want to be a chef, do it, but just please have, uh, a plan B ready
Hmm.
because it wasn't as glamorous as it is now, and it was certainly not as mainstream. It was still considered a fairly vocational career. Uh, they said just get an education, and once you have an education, do whatever you want. Right? I mean, knock yourself out. We will not stop you. But I was, of course, the belligerent 16, 17-year-old, and I went ahead and I did apply to a whole bunch of hotel management institutes because really, at that point in time, the only option one had was the tried and tested hotel management courses in India. There were only a handful of institutions offering, high quality education in that space. There was the IHMs, of course, which have been around for a very long time. There was the Oberoi School, which was a postgrad program, which which wouldn't accept me straight from school. There was Waksha, which is in Manipal, which is where I went to also for an interview, and so I went ahead and applied to all of them.
Hmm.
And crafty as I was trying to be, I decided, given Delhi's notorious cutoffs, I applied only to one college, and because I knew I just would never get in, and no one ever got in. And by this way, I would basically not get into this, and I would have no choice but get into one of the hotel management schools. So I'd basically, I'd scam my way through this entire thing. And I'd convinced my parents that, look, I went ahead and applied in DU and I just didn't get in. I never told them that I applied only to one college as opposed to 40 or 30 or whatever it is that other people apply to. And I had the grade. So, I mean, I did make a cutoff. And I went in and I interviewed at all of these places and I gave my, they used to have group discussions and all these things were big. Um, so I did that entire thing. I got acceptance letters from all of them. They were very happy to have me, um, be part of uh, their batches. But something very peculiar happened at one of my last interviews, which was all the way, in Manipal. I had to take the Konkan railway hadn't opened at that time, so I had this 3-day journey by train from Delhi to Manipal, and it was long and tiring. But I got there, and it was beautiful. Also, I never really explored that part of the country, and I sort of got dressed up, and I went for this interview, and there was this very hallowed set of hotel people, all from the ITC group. And ITC, of course, was the be all and end all of hotels at that point. And there was Taj and there was ITC, and you know,
Hmm.
everything else did not exist. And I remember there was a gentleman sitting across, and he asked me, "What do you like to read?" At that point, I was going through this huge science fiction and fantasy phase, and I said, "I love science fiction." And he turned around and he said, "Okay, so can you name me the author who sits in a wheelchair and uh, can't talk and all that, and basically writes science fiction?" And I looked straight in the eye and said, "You must be talking about Stephen Hawking, and for God's sake, he doesn't write science fiction; he writes science." So I think this man took great umbrage at that and said, you sound very belligerent. I said, I'm not. I'm just stating facts. You're calling a science writer a science fiction writer, and I think that's sacrilege.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, sure. If you're such a smart ass, why don't you tell me who the science fiction writers are? So I rattled off a whole bunch of names. So here I am at a hotel school talking about science fiction and science, and that was odd. But I come from a fairly educated family, so we've always made to read, and it just came naturally. And at the end of it, another gentleman who was very, very distinguished with a big mustache and all, he's like, "After you're done, why don't we catch up for a coffee?" And I said, "Sure." So I met him afterwards, and he took me to the coffee shop and he said, "Look, you look like a smart guy. Uh, I mean, you clearly have a good career path in front of you. Why do you want to do this? Because the only glamour you see in this industry is the tie I'm wearing. It's very, very unglamorous." So I explained to him. I said, "Look, I'm doing this because I really love food, and that's the space that I want to be in. The only options I seem to have are just regular hotel management." And he said, "If I were you, I wouldn't do it." And I was completely taken aback. I said, "For the last 2 years, all I've done is work towards this goal, and here I am being told that don't do it." And for a young impressionable mind, that's the gravity of a statement like that is immense. So I was so taken by that whole thing that I missed my train back home, and then I had to go off to Bangalore, which is now where I live. And that's the first time I ever came to a sleepy town called Bangalore, where there were the two major arteries called MG Road and Brigade Road were literally empty. And on a Saturday night or something, I met up with one of my dad's old friends who finally put me on an Indian Air India flight or Indian Airlines flight back to Delhi. Um, and that was it. And I all this was done, and I got back to Delhi, and I had to go and see what was happening with the one place I'd applied to. And I remember I went up, and my mom accompanied me, and there was this big notice board in college, and I went up to it, and I glanced through the list, and I said, "Shit, didn't get in." And I walked away, and suddenly a common friend of ours, uh, Tanika, and Tanika has expletives rolling off her tongue all the time, and I can't remember what she said or something, the BC or the C word or something like that. Yelled across when I was heading towards the gate, saying, oh, your name is on the list, right? You made the cutoff and you're there on the interview list. And I couldn't believe it. My mom couldn't believe it. So I went ahead for the interview. And this is where it gets even more interesting. So, of course, the Stephens interview, which is what the college was, is famously difficult. And I walk in, and there's this distinguished set of academics sitting over there. Arnold Wilson was the principal. Upinder Singh was the HOD. There was Tonika Sarkar, who then later became the HOD. There was a bunch of other people, and uh, we started having a discussion. And Wilson looked at me and said, "It mentions here that you're interested in cooking." I said, "Yes, I love it." He's like, "So, what do you like to cook?" And for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, the entire discussion was about food and about regionality, about cuisines of different parts of the world, and about nuances. So I went to a hotel school and I spoke about science, and I went to St. Stephen's for history and I spoke about food. And of course, all of us had a good laugh because food somehow connected everyone in that room.
Mm.
And in the end, I think a couple of them asked them, "Are you actually interested in history?" I said, "Yes, I am. I am, and I love the subject." And they asked me the questions that I clearly got right, and and I got through. And I think that's really when I reached that moment in life where, like, do I want to do the hotel school path, or do I want to just go here because uh, this also sounds like fun. There was one more thing that I found a little galling when I went to these interviews to different colleges for hotel management. A lot of the people I met when I had conversations with them who were also there applying for for the same courses.
Mm.
And I said, "Why? What makes you? What's your passion? I mean, why are you doing this?" Oh my! Yeah. And so many of them turn around and say, "I couldn't get into engineering, and I couldn't get into this, and I couldn't get to that, so I'm taking this as a consolation degree." and
Yeah.
and that also made me think. I said, do I really want to be surrounding myself with people who don't really want to do this, but are doing it under duress? Or would I
Yeah.
rather be in a space where there is actually a competitive and healthy atmosphere? And I think that was also a very defining moment for me. And so I started studying history, but I never gave up on the cooking, and I continued to cook through school and college, professionally as well. So
That's
I actually
incredible.
started my cooking career, way before most people think I did.
I didn't even know this. That's fascinating. Also, because I was stuck on North Campus all the time. But apparently, a lot of our common friends knew what a genius chef cook you already were.
I was
Um,
cooking at Cafe Turtle at Khan Market,
I
and that
heard.
was the only
I
thing in Khan Market. You remember? I mean, Khan Market wasn't on the map for any.
That is a pretty epic start, I have to say. So let me ask you then. It sounds to me when I'm talking to you, you do strike me as someone who has a pretty strong, sense of self, inner voice, self confidence. Are these things that have come to you along the way, like along with success? Because I do want to ask you, what you make of success. I mean, on this podcast, we talk to a lot of people about the success and the awards and the expertise, but also the behind the scenes. What happens when things are not going well? What are some of the darker sort of ups and downs? But let's start with success. How do you define it for yourself? How have you kept your career going? Because you also have reinvented yourself in the last few years. And I was reading some of your interviews, and it looked like this was a decision you took, in the middle of a pandemic. Not the most maybe logical decision, but can you take us through a little bit of your own, inner voice, how you take decisions like this, and how you define success?
Well, I have never been driven by either the pursuit of success, or uh, neither has it ever gotten to my head. And I know, I'm sure there'll be critics of mine who would love to disagree, but the critics of mine love to disagree about everything I say. I could fart and they disagree with that. And that's the nature of the beast. I think there are a lot of people, and this is something that I've come to realize, who who genuinely take pleasure in being able to bring somebody down, and that seems to be their raison d'être. They just don't like watching anybody do well. My doing well is not determined by the critic or my PR machinery. It is determined by the customer that walks in through the door. For me, that person, those people have always been sacrosanct in my approach to work. I would I would do anything for my customers, and that's how I've always approached work. I'm sitting here today in a position where I do not need to be in the kitchen, but I am every single day without fail. And it surprises a lot of people. It's like, you're in the kitchen, you're cooking. I said, what else do you expect me to do? I'm a chef. I'm not sitting in some ivory tower, overlooking stuff. I'm actually down there. I actually have an ivory tower office in my new kitchen, but I've never sat there ever. It's not for me. It's for my other senior chefs who sit over there and do whatever work they have to. If they need some downtime, I'm always down in the kitchen. I still stand in the kitchen and eat my one meal standing. I don't sit for a meal. There's some things that I've always lived by. I think people just paint a different image in their mind, and that's not even close to the truth. I've been a hard boss, and I've always admitted it. And you have to understand the context it came from. I went off to New York. I studied in a fantastic culinary school. I worked in some incredible places, and I came back uh, to a country which I had to kind of readjust myself to, because the level of professionalism, the level of expertise, the level of execution that I was working at just did not exist over here. And to then put together a motley crew of people and try to open a fine dining restaurant, I knew at the back of my head that I'd be fighting many battles. I'd be fighting battles within my own teams because I was too young and most of them were older than me. My cooks, I was suddenly in a position of leadership, uh, you know, way before anybody in India is used to that, because here the system is very it was very hierarchical, very rigid. The whole celebrity chef culture did not exist, and suddenly you have this little runt of a boy who's shown up. I mean, not that way, but from an image point of view, and is throwing his weight around and is very aggressive because he's a perfectionist. Done things done a certain way. It was very very difficult. You had ownership at the other side who had a very different idea of what a fine dining restaurant should be, because they were a little more in tune with what the market is. So they're like, we'll do a restaurant that does grills. And I said, I've just come back from all these Michelin stars, and you just want me to stand there and grill lamb chops? I have nothing against grilled lamb chops. I very happily serve them, but that can't define the space. That can't define the product. And then I had the customer who was just completely unwilling to try anything new. And for them, continental food only meant what it did because that's all they were exposed to. Or a cocktail culture was only lychee martinis and apple martinis, which were huge at that time, right? And there was just so many battles to fight. So I had the choice to either just give up and think, screw it, I'm heading back to the West, and I'm taking the easy way out. And my sponsorship and visas are waiting, and they'd very happily have me back there because I was doing extremely well over there. I opted not to do that, and fight the tougher fight, because I was determined at trying to bring about some level of change here, and expose audiences to this, because that's what I enjoyed. I am very at home in India. You ask me at any point in my life, would you move back to New York or live in London? I wouldn't. I'm glad here, but now with Bangalore, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, why don't I just move elsewhere? Because it's just, I mean, fine traffic. I mean, there's just many things that work against it. But that success has not been a driver for me. The fear of failure has, and I am always propelled by that. And I don't like to fail at things. I am somebody who understands that I'm creating a living, breathing entity, and it doesn't fail. You need to nurture it. You need to keep tweaking it. You have to understand the concept of pivoting. You need to train your people. And sometimes that's harsh because you suddenly inherit people who just had no exposure, no training. And, there's a lot of talk about toxic work cultures and all of that. You have to understand that the actual toxicity is sitting outside of the kitchen doors. It's not within. You have to see how customers behave sometimes. It's appalling. And the rudeness and the sense of entitlement can make the best server just melt away out of fear because they're not being able to handle the situation because some upstart in the kitchen has screwed up. And one head chef cannot be tasting every plate of food that goes out. So mistakes happen. But here, the friction that it creates is tremendous. It's very, of course, now I'm at a position where it doesn't happen, or as much, but it still happens, and it becomes a snowball effect. It becomes a chain reaction, And you can see that
Mm.
that tension kind of sort of creeps in, and then there's this yelling and shouting and the adrenaline, and somebody is feeling victimized, and you go down to it and you're like, but why didn't you taste it before you sent it out? And you realize that you're working with a lot of people who are in the habit of just not tasting their food because it's Western food. And that's not the type of food they eat. And that, Ritu Dalmia had said this many years ago, that the biggest challenge of working in Western kitchens in India, and I still say that running a Western kitchen in India is still the hardest thing to do. Is
Mm.
still the hardest thing to do. Running an Indian restaurant, running an Asian restaurant is much, much easier. And I've run them. I know
You've
that,
done all
right?
of Yeah, yeah.
Running a Western restaurant is just one of the most difficult things to do, because hitting that balance of flavor, supply chain logistics, getting that exceptional quality out, which you cannot douse with a huge level of alien flavors that kind of mask that.
Take over.
And this is, I'm not being disparaging in any way, because I know I've done these cuisines, right? There's nuance
Mm.
in that also, but that's a lot more forgiving because it's got a lot more familiarity for the audiences. This doesn't necessarily have that. So, there is a learning curve for the cook, there's a learning curve for the server, there's a learning curve for the customer. And it's still a beautiful model. So, it does make me a little more disciplinarian in that sense, right? Because there's just, especially in this kind of food, it's all a la minute. Everything is done to order, and it
Mm.
has to be fresh. It has to be executed to a certain level. You can only cook a certain piece of protein for that many minutes to get it exactly how you want it. Again, it's not at the mercy of a bulk cooked a gravy or a curry where it's been softened in that. So there's a lot of things at play, and that's why I always find it very gratifying as a chef, because
Mm.
it really tests your skills and your abilities on an ongoing level. And I'm always maintain that you're only as good as your last meal. No matter how much aura and whatever you can put together. When I left Olive and I came and I started Lupa, which obviously was a year and a half in the making, because you can't just create a brick and mortar out of nowhere. uh, I knew my work was cut out, because I had let go also of a lot of trained staff, where we'd all become creatures of habit, where I just needed to
Mm.
come up with a concept and we'd be able to execute it really fast. Here, I had to literally reinvent the wheel. No matter how much skill or talent I have, it does not necessarily translate into a new team. You still need to work from scratch. And I had senior chefs in place, and there was a lot of confusion because I was busy with the project, and we didn't have the best start. We had a lot of good things going for us, but everything wasn't where I would want it to be. And people I had nurtured as customers for nearly 17 years were very happy to drop me like a hot potato and walk away, because that's what I
Really?
said. And of course, that's how it works. The restaurant business is
Mm.
ruthless like that. And I
Wow.
may have great personal equities with them, but that doesn't necessarily translate into loyalty for a
Mm.
brand and for a product, because there is choice and there is availability. And then slowly I had to, work my way
Build that.
up and get back massively hands on again and build that back. And it's built back. But I understand how fragile the system is. There is no surety at
Yeah.
all.
So I was just reading. So there's one of these articles. We'll put the link to. It's a really great article in Money Control. So as I was researching for this, where they talk about how Lupa's got a spot now in La Liste, a French restaurant guide's top 1,000 restaurants in the world for this year. Recently won 4 ultimate stars at the Ultimate Restaurant Ratings 2024 by Culinary Culture, and I no more and more awards and accolades are coming. But when you talk about fear of failure driving you, Manu, at one point, it also sounds like you have taken on so much more responsibility as well, right? Because now you're all of this rests on you and your partner. What kind of drove that decision, or did you feel like it was just time for you to helm everything, and you have several brands under MCV?
Yes, I think I had a bucket list of things that I wanted to do. I mean, even if you see I'm not very social media savvy, and I'm certainly not, which I have been told by n number of people that I should be, because I have just such great content. Uh, well, I'm a bit of a Hell's Kitchen. You just need to put a camera, and then you have all the content you want. But no, I have a wicked sense of humor, and I love my staff to death, and they know that, and that's why I have very low attrition rates. and people like to stick around, right? They know that I lose my temper, but I'm their best friend 5 minutes later. I don't hold grudges. I fly off the handle in at the drop of a spoon, but it's never ever because I have a personal agenda. It's because something was not right with the product, or something was not, to the point on hygiene, or something was not to the point on grooming. There's lots of little things, and I said everything needs to, it's a butterfly effect. Because if you start doing something wrong right now, by the end of the week you will see how this played out badly, or by the end of the service you'll see how it played out badly. You become intuitive as a chef after doing this for so many years. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can just teach, but it's definitely something that you can guide people towards, and you need people who are very cued in. I know there's a lot of talk about the Gen Z and the social media distractions, etc. That's not any different to my kitchen. All my cooks and chefs are fairly on the ball with their social media and their partying and everything. And I love the fact that they have absolutely normal lives. This wasn't true to 10, 15 years ago, where these people would come on bicycles and live in shanties practically, because it was a very, very poorly paid profession, and very demanding and very thankless. It's still very thankless, but now they are paid well. They come from great backgrounds. They see it as a pertinent career choice. They're coming in their gadis and their bikes, and carrying their iPhones, and doing as well as the next person their age. So I'm very happy to have been part of that change. But I still realize that you know it's not necessarily that things get exponentially better in the kitchen. It's just a modern version of exactly how it was 15 years ago. Um,
Mm,
and that's kind of frustrating for me sometimes, because I really wish that would start changing. Uh, there was, of course, there was a huge churn initially when you open a restaurant. A lot of these youngsters, I put out a call for hiring, showed up, and within the week they're saying, we'd like a work-life balance, and I'm like, knock yourself out. I mean, I would never stop you from having a work-life balance. And I have some rules that are sacrosanct for me. I never follow my employees on social media, because
mm,
I never want them to feel that somebody's watching over them, checking their stories out or whatever it is. Let them have a great time without ever having to think that somebody's, spying on them.
yeah.
And I know a lot of people who do that shit. Um, so I
That's
said, please have it, have your work-life balance. And said, yeah, but we'd like to work 6 hours a day, 4 days a week. I said, this is a restaurant business. We don't operate 6 hours a day, 4 days a week. It's impossible for me to provide you that kind of platform, because I have to essentially quadruple my staff, and the way that I pay, you know, a bulk of my revenue is just going to be HR costs. It's an untenable business model. But this is what I was faced with, and I said, I'm sorry, unfortunately, this business is not for you, and it's the fact. I'm sure there's other service industries that may just work for you. Retail might be a good option for you, but this isn't. And I had a lot of them dropping out, because apparently they just couldn't deal with the work pressure, which honestly, honestly, it really wasn't that much. You had regular working hours, you had a shift like anywhere else, and you had to clock in and clock out. No one's forcing you to do anything. Take your days off, take your comp off, take your holidays, take your leaves, take your sick days, getting the benefits. Everyone's there, trainings are happening, but still, it's not good enough. And that's an internal conundrum in the business right now, and that's why so much of this industry is fueled by immigrant labor, who's really trying to set a good life for themselves, who are coming in from Bengal, who are coming in from Manipur, who are coming in from Jharkhand, uh, everywhere in the country. You go to Kerala, you go to Chennai, you go to Delhi, you go to Bangalore, you go to Raigad, you go to Raipur. This is exactly the staff mix you'll see.
mm.
Is people who are moving in from different parts, because nobody else really wants to work. And then it's my job to be able to take these people and then put them up to fine dining standards, and that's when your work is really cut out. Um, so I
So do you
think
think, Manu, at some point when we talk about, like, toxic workplaces, which you mentioned, there's been a lot in the headlines recently, especially, with the cases of overwork, exhaustion, people even losing their lives. Where do you index on empathy as a leader? And do you think that's changed in your journey? And obviously balancing that out with the needs of the business. Where do you feel like you index on empathy?
I have never, ever, ever prevented my staff from taking time off, taking leaves, taking offs, expected them to work ungodly hours, loaded on so much on them that they couldn't handle it. Uh, and I've always been very, very cognizant of the fact that if I overload the machine breaks. And
Mm,
that's how it works. And there will be something that will go wrong, which is going to come back and bite me on the ass later. Um, and it's, look, it's a human operation. You know, everything happens by hand. People have to lift
mm,
tables and move them around. It's tiring. I always look towards mechanization and systems to try to improve things. Right now, my kitchen at Lupa is the envy of the whole country for a standalone restaurant. Hotel chefs have come in and said, shit, we haven't seen a kitchen like this.
wow.
It's modern. It is equipped to the teeth. It is spacious. It is brightly lit. It's airy. It's a joy to work in, right?
Mm,
Trying to provide that. A lot of restaurateurs don't think like that
they
because it's a
don't.
massive bloody investment. They'd rather spend all that money into making prettier restaurants in the front, and prettier uniforms or whatever it is. But that does not make a good product necessarily. I really, really do believe that I need to invest in my infrastructure and my people to try to streamline processes and try to build massive levels of efficiency. And I'm all about that. Good
Mm,
systems and efficiency so people can do outstanding work in that much time, as opposed to having to spend and exempt so much more time just doing stuff that was completely unnecessary to begin with. And with me, it happens every single day. You'd see me walking through the kitchen and catching hold of one of the cooks and saying, "What are you doing? You are just spending too much time doing something that you could have done in 5 minutes if you just applied your mind." And that's really where the training happens, right? There was a boy putting hummus, trying to balance a bag in his hand to pack it and vacuum seal it, etc., for an event that it had to go to. And I'm like, you're just going to spend an hour and a half trying to balance that bag when there's just an easier way of doing it. Or somebody was standing there and they were holding a knife and cutting, and I saw that they were putting too much pressure. Knife skills are appalling across this country. It's just appalling. And I'm very happy to make this statement. I just can't understand that people don't even understand the mechanics of a knife. That this is how it was designed to be used. And you'd be amazed at the number of fine dining restaurants and chefs you see or cooks you see who cut backwards with a knife that was designed to be pushed forward. That's how leverage was created on it. That basic training has not existed, and the person has been a cook for 5 years or 6 years and is trying to work up, the ranks and asking for a higher position. And the first thing I see is like, you cut like that and you want a higher position. I really don't care how you cook. I'm sorry, you're not welcome in this kitchen. And that's why I maybe get this title that I'm arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I'm just honest. And you don't like honesty, deal with it. I'm sorry. With me, this is what you get. It's
mm,
at face value. Um, so I was telling this guy, I was like, now look at the mechanics of what's going to happen and see how your back and your shoulder blades are going to start hurting in the next few months. And you're going to say, oh my God. And your mom is going to call me and she's like, my child is sick because he's sprained his shoulder and he can't work. It's because you have started off wrong and you come from 4 years of a degree. Did no one teach you how to use a knife properly? Take a step back, use the full knife, use the motion and the blade of the knife, and you gently just have to rock your arm using your shoulder to push it. Leverage will do the work. Muscles don't are not needed. It's just common sense, and it doesn't exist with so many young cooks. Not even young cooks, experienced cooks, and that's what is where I'm talking about efficiency is being built in, right? If everyone operated with a certain level of efficiency, which only takes a little
mm.
bit of intervention to improve to streamline and improve, kitchens would work beautifully. More people would join the fray. More people would be excited by it. The product will improve exponentially. And that's what I try to work towards every single day.
That's
I
what you're
still
trying
do
to
a
do.
lot of butchery, with my cooks and show them how to break stuff down, how to respect. I get my cooks to break down a piece of fish so that they are the people who will cook that fish at the end of the night for service. And they will respect it a lot more because they had to do all the elbow grease work of breaking it down. that respect also doesn't exist in kitchen very often. One department kind of craps on the other one because we just have the thing that cheap labor, so everyone's going to do everything, and there's no streamlining.
Yeah. That's a lot. I'm going to ask you a few more questions, but first, obviously, what you're doing is working. So clearly, stick to your process and your system and your high standards. I'm going to read out and let you see a quote from Maria Goretti, who was on this podcast. I said, she gave this to me like with a very quick turnaround because I'm literally recording with Manu at 3. Do you have time to send me something? She calls you a chef that is calmly showing your craft, constantly also striving to deliver better. Your kitchens are always sparkling clean. Your staff is on point. Your bar menu is divine. Your food is absolutely fantastic. And as a person, you're wonderful, well read, well spoken. You let your craft speak for you. She says she's a huge, huge fan of you as a person and a talent. I have a feeling compliments make you very awkward, but I do want to say for a second that's quite a lovely thing. I
Yeah,
don't.
Maria is
Um,
lovely. I love Maria. She's just such a star. I mean, I grew up watching Maria, right? Who didn't? I mean, especially when MTV had just come in, and it was, it was Ruby, it was Maria, it was Nikhil. I mean, these were the stars at that time, right? So, I mean, I've always admired her so much. And then she got into cooking, and
yeah,
the way she's approached it, and how she's grown up in that, as this new career, and just it's admirable, the way she approaches that craft. It's the love that she demonstrates for it, the passion that she demonstrates for it is really what's missing in the industry. I think this industry needs more of that, and Maria
mm,
shows that, and that's why I'm such a big fan. I've always been a fan of hers, and now a bigger fan. And she's just such a joy to be around and chat to. She has this aura of
yeah,
positivity, which I don't. Uh, so I mean, great counter in that sense. I'm always called very sulky and grumpy and all of that. It's always, because I'm not, I'm not a typical restaurateur. I'm not somebody who's floating around the floor and chatting to people and sitting down and enjoying a glass of wine with them and going for every party with their hosts and being seen at social gatherings and events. You literally see me nowhere. I'm very hidden. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Even in my own restaurant, you barely see me because I'm in the kitchen. So I have a nice show kitchen. People can come in the kitchen and say hi to me. Or if I really know somebody, I will step out. But I'm always there. I'm not floating around being a PR person. And I think that does get me a lot of respect from customers because they realize the guy is, he's on the job. He's doing what he loves doing, and he's doing it every day. And I've had lots of people who tried to put me down, over the years, in the recent past, especially after I opened Lupa, on this crusade to try to put me down using social media, using anonymous uh, messages that were floated around and went viral, etc. But honestly, I've just been in the game too long to let any of that bother me or let put me down because, like I said, for me, the person that matters in the end of the day is the customer. And if the customer coming in is being looked after, and I'll tell you something very interesting about me. I have not read a single Zomato review in the last 8 years. I decided this a long time, right? After I opened Toast and Tonic, and we got great reviews. I said, I will not read reviews anymore. I will just not. Call me, I mean, they can call me arrogant for it, but I'll tell you how this works. You walk into a restaurant, you come for an experience, right? If something is going wrong, there is an opportunity at that time for the customer to remedy that situation. And trust me, any restaurant worth their salt is going to go out of their way to make sure that your experience is a good one. They're not sitting here to give you a bad experience. A dish can be oversalted, for God's sake. The world's not going to come to an end. It can be replaced, it can be corrected. But if we're going to be in a mindset where we're constantly wanting to feel victimized in some way and then use a platform, go home and then just type all kinds of drivel, it makes no sense. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. You've had a great experience and you want to share that experience with the world, sure. But you want to leave making sure that a negative experience just continues. I don't understand that. And I mean, especially for restaurants like ours, right, where we just completely we're very customer centric. I find that very bizarre, and I noticed that with a lot of things. I saw a lot of falsehoods. And that's when I said, I'm just not going to do this anymore. So I don't want to wake up every morning and shower myself with any kind of positivity or negativity which is coming from this third party source. My teams can do it, they can handle it. I personally will not. And the reviews kept getting better because I was just focused on the job rather than worrying about this. And there's this panic that sets in with a lot of new restaurateurs who are like, oh my God, this guy said this dish is not good. Tell the chef to change the dish. Why? Why? What is this constant knee jerk? It just shows how unsure we are of ourselves very often.
Hmm.
As business people, as professionals, it's fine. People will come around to it. There's constructive criticism. There's so many things. There's a little note. A lot of people do that. They drop a little note saying, "This was outstanding," or "This was just spectacular." It reminded me of something I had in Spain, but they had this one little extra element. And that's when I will engage with them saying, can you remember what that was? Because I would love to be at that level.
Hmm.
And personally, I've not had it, but I've done this from bookish knowledge. And you come from experience. So, and that's when you develop friendships. And
Yeah.
and the friendships that I've had because of what I do, by virtue of what I do, are unbelievable. I mean, I literally have kids who are 4 years old or 3 years old when I started cooking and are coming, with their girlfriends now or with their wives now. So I started very young and they came there as babies and they are now, whatever, 23, 24 years old. It's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a great feeling. I was at a
Yeah.
prayer meeting for a granny who just passed away a few days ago because she was such a dear customer, and so was her daughter, is her daughter, and so is their grandkids. So there's three generations that a chef covers very often, and when you're constantly engaging with them, you become like family. I mean, it's without actually being there. I don't know. It's hard to describe because when they step into a restaurant, they're coming home. They're not just going to a restaurant. And I think those personal relationships matter. And they matter with every customer. And every customer has the right to exercise them. And they should. And not become food critics overnight. Right? Uh, and I said something about that. And somebody called me a disparaging asshole on, I think, an Instagram comment. So I said the democratization of food reviewing was the death of food reviewing. And they said, my God, you're such a privileged asshole or whatever. I said, yeah, sure, man. How would you feel if your kid was gauged by the entire neighborhood as opposed to the education institution they sent you to because they're professionals? No, this
Yeah.
obfuscation I'm very good at because I realize
Yeah.
that's the only thing that people understand.
Yeah. So, usually we wind down with gratitude if possible. Is there something you're grateful for? It sounds like what you just said about these relationships, it's quite beautiful. I didn't realize that, food can, of course, food does connect us, and then we develop these kind of relationships. What is something that, or a couple of things that you're grateful for?
Food connects us, food doesn't connect us. I don't know, Amrita, because, for me, in all these years of cooking, and this is a well known fact, when I go out to a table, I almost never speak about food. I have never been the chef who'll go and ask you, how is everything?
Oh, thank
Did you
God.
enjoy
Yeah.
this? Was this
Yeah.
nice? Can I make you something? No. I will go and speak to them about weather. I'll speak to them about politics. I'll speak to them about art. I'll speak to them about, the detailing of a mitre stitch on the end of a leather chair. I will speak to them about the beautiful pashmina that they're wearing and how that stunning craft is gone out of style. And there's an instant connect with anybody of any age, from any background, no matter where they're from. I'm in the hospitality business. I'm not just a cook. And that's why my conversations always transcend the food because I have a bunch of people who handle that part for me.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful for all the thousands of people, many, many tens of thousands of people over the years that I've connected with and who have helped me become who I am today because without them I'm nothing. Um, and as uncomfortable as I am with compliments, I am even more uncomfortable taking awards. You should see my face when I step up on stage. I don't look like the same person. My face touches. I'm embarrassed. Uh, I Perhaps I don't like attention, and maybe that's why you don't see me on television, etc. Largely. I mean, Ranveer and Vikas and Pooja, all these people are good friends. So, I mean, if they call and say, please come and do an episode or whatever, I'll do that, but you'll largely not see me do television, you'll not see me a lot on social media, because at the end of being around people all day long,
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I just want is my little private space, and just to go home. And I think that is really what's been a driving force, to keep my little work life balance. But honestly, gratitude to my customers, gratitude to the people who put up with me all, for years, or who had very punishing experiences under me, and also great experiences under me. I mean,
Mm.
everybody has helped shape me in some way. Um,
I love that.
and
Yeah.
and that doesn't change. I mean, even today, I get most excited about some 20-year-old who's just coming with full guns blazing, just so much energy, bouncing up the stairs. And I'm like, I love this. Now I need to focus my energies and efforts into making this person outstanding. and
Oh,
and that's why we get along, and that's why I have it's like family. It really is.
I love that. You were talking earlier about being a fan of science fiction and stuff. I do want to ask you. Maria also said you're very well read. What is one thing you might be reading that you really like, or something recently that you read that you love?
No, I have to say, over the last year, my reading has really taken a backseat, because this, between single thread and this, has been so hands on,
Hmm.
and so many things happening all the time. I've actually, besides the many newspapers and magazine articles that I read in the morning, I have not really picked up books. And there's that Japanese term, right, where you basically keep buying books even if you're not reading them. I definitely
Exactly.
have that. So huh?
Yeah. No, no. I,
What's the,
I know what you mean.
yeah, I mean, I know that for a fact that I have close to about 100 new titles that I picked up that is lying at
Wow.
home unread. So I will now, hopefully, after this year end, pick that up again. But I picked up a lot of history.
Okay.
So I've gone back to reading a lot of history, a lot of art history, a lot of culture, a lot of deep science. I've always loved, pure sciences opposed to that. So,
Yeah.
and you have to work your way through that. Going back to anthropology, I take training sessions for my staff 3 times a week, for 2 hours each, where I teach them everything except the menu. Um, so we cover from the history of ancient Egypt to North Africa, to how silk is made, and how technology works, what a cloud a cloud is, and what blockchain is. Because these people haven't
Wow.
gone to school, a lot of them they haven't gone to college, and I have taken it upon myself to make them. I don't want them to be waiters. I want them to be extremely confident, articulate individuals, and who walk up to a table with personality. And I think that's what the future is going to be. It's going to be outstanding experiences, outstanding service, and that's really going to be the defining thing. If his chicken tikka is better than his chicken tikka, will not matter anymore. These little things, nuances don't matter. Everything will become automated now. You know, I mean, literally, you can pull off a recipe of Instagram and make it tomorrow, and
Mm.
create and pick up a design from Pinterest and put it together. This is the lazy way of doing things. Uh, there's no learning in that, right? You haven't really gone through the process. You haven't developed your own aesthetic style. You haven't spent time understanding what details mean. You've just cut, copy,
Mm.
paste, and sure, it can work, but there's no. I'm a hopeless romantic, but yeah, I don't think there's any thrill in that. There's money in it, but there's no thrill in that. So now I'm focused on making all my people amazing individuals, amazing professionals, especially those that come from the lesser privileged backgrounds. And
Mm.
and you should see, man, I have 100% attendance, and it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory. They have a choice of taking a break and not coming because they've done a full shift, and then they have to come to my training, and then they have to go back in the evening shift. Every single one shows up every time, and
Wow.
I cannot tell you the difference it's made in a year of training. Each one of them now has, they crack jokes at tables, they have sense of humor, they're becoming themselves, they're not scared.
Yeah.
They're not subservient. I hate that. I hate
Mm.
subservience, especially in service. But a lot of people, a lot of places thrive on that. And I think that's very dated. That's a colonial hangover. We need to get over that. You're
Yeah.
here for an experience. You're not here for some somebody who's your house help to,
Like a feudal
do
kind
stuff
of
for
thing.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
a feudal mindset. And I've always believed in not following that.
That you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to come to Bangalore and check out Lupa properly.
I
And
know you were there when we were hatching plans for it. You remember that one
yes,
day
I
you
do.
showed up. Yeah,
I crashed
when
your
we had
meeting.
the we had the
I
presentation. Yeah,
when you had the presentation, I saw the plans. I've been there to see it when you were not there, but before it had opened. So clearly now between the Bangalore Lit Fest in December and something else, I'll come. Thank you
awesome.
so much. I listen. I had like third, fourth, fifth second guessing about should I ask Manu to come on the podcast because I know you're quite private and I know you do very selective things. So, firstly, thank you for taking the time to do this. Thank you for what you do and taking so much, paying so much attention to your craft and just being who you are. I love it. And
Thank
whoever
you
these
very much
critics
for
are,
having
I'm
me.
gonna handle it. I'm kidding. I don't know how to handle criticism, but we'll ignore them.
Just taking your stride.
It's the first time I'm hearing of this. Everyone else I've checked up on you about has been raving, and not just in Bangalore either. So there we go.
No, I mean it's not. I mean it wasn't in that refrain. Like there's just some people who want to see you go down, and this
Hmm.
the whole ecosystem become very complex right now. It's like there are people who essentially thrive. They may have failed in other parts of their lives, and I'm again not being disparaging over here. But the lowest hanging fruit is become a food influencer. I wasn't
Yeah.
able to do this, so now I'll
Yeah.
become this, and I'll start making comments on that because I eat. I mean, for God's sake, that has made you an expert, and it just boggles my mind. So I don't
Yeah.
engage. I mean, I'll say hi, I'll give them a hug, I'll have a chitter chatter, but I will not go and try to validate my existence and
Yeah.
my profession to people like that. Fuck no, I will not do that, and you can't pay me to do that.
I have my headline, I think now. Thank you. Thank you for that. And the F bomb had to come in right at the end, but I love this.
Yeah.
Just so authentically you. Thank you for taking the time again.
Thanks, Amrita.